What I wanted to do is, as I like to do, is read from the NHS website what the actual definition is and the overview, so that we can look at it from a solid, sound footing. Okay, so attention deficit hyperactive disorder is a condition that affects people's behaviour. People with ADHD can seem restless, may have trouble concentrating, and may act on impulse. I'd agree with that for myself. Symptoms of ADHD tend to be noticed at an early age and may become more noticeable when a child's circumstances change, such as when they start a new school. Most cases are diagnosed when children are 6 to 12 years old, and that's probably when it was noticed my behaviour was absolutely abominable. And I actually moved schools every year to every 2 years, so I was moving schools quite a lot, and therefore the pressure of starting new schools, which in my opinion was one of the worst things to go through, but it does shape you for later on in life. Really did trigger a lot of different problems that I was already struggling with. The symptoms of ADHD usually improve with age, but many adults who are diagnosed with the condition at a young age continue to experience problems. I would agree, I do struggle with those things, but I've found coping mechanisms. I've discovered ways to lessen those effects, and actually I've discovered ways to make them work for me, which I'll go into in a bit. People with ADHD may also have additional problems as sleep and anxiety disorders. Well, there you go. Anxiety disorders, OCD is an anxiety disorder. So it just goes to show that all of these things do interlace and link into each other in one way or another. Getting help. Many children go through phases where they're restless or inattentive. This is often completely normal and does not necessarily mean they have ADHD. But you should consider raising your concerns with your child's teacher, their school's special education needs coordinator, or a GP if you think their behaviour may be different from most other children their age. It's also a good idea to have a speak to a GP if you're an adult and think you may have ADHD, but were not diagnosed with the condition as a child. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward and fairly easy to understand. What causes attention deficit hyperactive disorder? I couldn't have made that title any longer. The exact cause of ADHD is unknown, but the condition has been shown to run in families. Research has also identified a number of possible differences in the brains of people with ADHD when compared with those without the condition. I read a good book called Brain Lock. You'd have to look it up, and it was helpful for me. Other factors suggested as potentially having a role in ADHD include being born prematurely before the 37th week of pregnancy, having a low birth weight, smoking or alcohol, drug abuse during pregnancy. Well, none of those applied to my being popped out. ADHD can occur in people of any intelligence ability, although it's more common in people with learning difficulties. Yeah, well, it is difficult. It is common in people with learning difficulties because if you've got ADHD, you don't want to learn. You're busy thinking of other things. You can't pay attention. So, yeah, it's like chicken and an egg scenario. How attention deficit hyperactive that's so funny. Disorder, ADHD, is treated. Although there is no cure for ADHD, it's encouraging, it can be managed with appropriate educational support, advice and support for parents and affected children, alongside medicine if necessary. Medicine is often the first treatment offered to adults with ADHD, or psychology therapy such as cognitive behaviour therapy, CBT, may also help. And I've done those and they do help to an extent. So it's always worth looking into those. There are loads of really good YouTube chaps who can, and chapesses, who can give you advice and take you through some CBT training if you just have a little look. Living with attention deficit hyperactive disorder. That's my mum and dad. Hard work. Looking after a child with ADHD can be challenging, but it's important to remember that they cannot help their behaviour. Some issues that may arise in day-to-day life include getting your child to sleep at night, getting ready for school on time, listening to and carrying out instructions, being organised, social occasions. I'm doing a twitch now, my lip. Shopping. Adults with ADHD may also find they have similar problems, and some may have issues with relationships or social interaction. Now, that's what the NHS says, and I believe that it affects lots of people in lots of different ways. What time are we on? Let's just see. I don't want to bore you to death. No, it's already 8 minutes. Okay, I'm very conscious of not going on too much, but on the other hand, I want to be raw and real. I want to just talk from unedited personal experience. I haven't rehearsed any of this. I've just gone and decided to just let it out. It's easier, and I'm a bit lazy, to be honest. Can't bother to write it all down. So I would say that from as long as I can remember, from being young, a kid, child, whatever, I was always told by my mum that I was naughty and hard work. And of course my mum and dad loved me, still do, which is a good job. But I would, in the middle, when I was in primary school, in the middle of the maths lesson, I would get my coat on and the teacher said, "What are you doing, Jonathan?" And I would say, "I'm going out to play," and I would just go and play in the playground on my own because I didn't want to go to the lesson, and it was boring. I do believe, I may not get it completely right, but from talking to my mum about it, she used to have to come into school, into various things I was part of. At Sunday school, I wasn't allowed to go. Well, I was. I went out, but I do believe, and I may be wrong, I remember my mum saying that she had to come out and sit with me, otherwise I wouldn't behave. And if that is incorrect, when my mum looks at this and says, "You've got that wrong," I'll change it. But I'm pretty sure it's fairly accurate. There was attention deficit. If it wasn't interesting, if it didn't capture me, I wasn't interested. I couldn't focus on it. And I remember this because I used to go into the class, and it became obvious that I needed to learn, and I was getting a lot of aggravation. Other kids were calling me thick. Teachers were saying I was stupid and lazy. I was already getting bullied verbally and told I was an idiot, and then I was going home, and my mum and dad obviously were going on what the teachers' reports were saying, which was that I was lazy. And the teachers did know. They did say I was intelligent. I don't know how they gleaned that, and had potential, but I was lazy and couldn't be bothered. And that was the story of my childhood growing up into teenage years. And all I can say is that from my point of view, I really, really wanted to do well. When we had spellings, it was doing. I have it on my shoulder now. It's annoying. When I had spellings, I always wanted to get a good mark, and I worked really hard at them, and I did practice, and I tried to. I couldn't seem to be interested, but I took them home and tried, and then we did the spelling test, and I just dreamed of getting 7 out of 20, but it was always 2 or 3, and have to see the teacher and get told off and blah blah blah. And then everyone in the class thought I was thick and stupid, and it was just humiliating, really. It wasn't something I wanted to go through because I was always a new boy at a new school. Every year or every 2 years we moved house. My dad had a job that meant we moved around the country, and that's the way it was. That's the way it happened. So I already didn't have a close collection of friends who knew or understood me. I was always the outsider, and it was very hard in some ways. But I don't want to make it all doom and gloom because I had a good childhood. I just didn't enjoy it. If that makes any sense. So when I progressed on to GCSEs and all that stuff you do, again, really, I tried to. I got into lessons and I couldn't pay attention. I just messed around and I would cause trouble and I would be naughty. I couldn't control my excitement and thrill of being naughty or doing pranks or basically causing mischief. And if I sat there and tried to work, after about literally it just seemed a minute, my attention just went. I just couldn't focus on anything. Reading, I took 7 years to read Enid Blyton's Valley of Adventure, and I recently had a look at that book. It's about that thick, and the letters are this huge. You could probably read it in probably a day if you really liked reading. It took me 7 years on and off to get through that book. Podcasts weren't out and audiobooks weren't around then. So I came out doing my GCSEs, waiting for the day to get my results, hoping that I might have done well. And I think the best marks I got were, I failed them basically. F, G, and most of the letters of the alphabet that really weren't going to impress your parents came up on my reports. So I left school with really nothing. And that was what I'm trying to say here is I'm going to leave it here because I did turn things around, and the way I turned things around is I found something I was interested in, and that was engineering and computer science.